New Zealand got its first real undercover cops in the mid-70s. Police joined the underworld, chasing ever more dangerous criminals.
You are stepping from the world that we all live in into another parallel existence.
Through the 80s and into the 90s, undercover agents moved with the times. As well as infiltrating lethal motorbike gangs, they were even targeting drug hawkers selling to tourists.
James Bond had his licence to kill, we had a licence to have fun.
But some of the agents who'd made the program a logistical success were now the police's broken soldiers.
We're the guilty secret of the New Zealand Police.
Having been dragged into a public debate over the hazards of undercover work, the police were forced to radically change the program as it headed into a new century.
And what you get as an agent after you've been in the scene for a while is everything just speeds up around you. You become extra perceptive about people, what they're thinking, what they're doing, what their actions mean. You can walk into a pub and basically scan that whole pub in seconds without looking like you're looking to see if there's anybody that you've arrested previously sitting in there.
Andrew Holland had arrested many criminals in a few short years as a uniformed officer. The ex-bushman joined the police as a 42-year-old, but soon made up for lost time.
I made it my business to get as many of them as I could. Hunt them. I'm a hunter.
Quickly drafted into the undercover program, Andy now started hunting Matamata's Titans gang, a tight-knit motorcycle club dealing in Class A drugs and stolen goods.
I think when you're looking at gaining access to a gangs, the most impenetrable would be the smaller motorcycle gangs, because they are tight and they've got a very strong sense of professionalism. And obviously, the smaller the group is, the less surface area there's to penetrate. I think there are some pretty dangerous occupations in the country, but I can't imagine too many that would be more dangerous than going undercover as a police officer and trying to infiltrate gangs.
Andy gained access to the Titans' inner sanctum with just 9 words, spoken in the street to the gang's treasurer.
We're talking about his Harley. I just sort of looked at him, like in a knowing sort of a way. I looked at him and I said, you fellas hooked up with HA, bro? What that means is, are you associated with HA, which is Hell's Angels? And it's not the terminology that a fella on the street would know or understand. And as soon as I said that to him, I clicked into a different section of his brain.
Thought you might be.
I entered a different part of his world. And from that one sentence, Tim eventually came to my motel room and sold me speed for the first time.
Gaining Tim's trust, Andy became the first police officer to set foot inside the Titans' fortress.
And I really had to steel myself to walk in there. And when you walk into that pad, it is totally secure. They open the deadlocks, let you in, you're getting photographed, videoed on your way in, so they've got your pictures, they know who you are. They take you in there, you deadlock the door behind you. You can't get out any window. You can't get over the fence. There's wire netting over the compound. So when you're in there, you're in there. They had the police radio on, speakers in most of the rooms. The frightening thing was, they had all the police codes beside the speakers on the wall. And those were photocopies from police stations. And you've got to ask yourself, how did they get them?
The Titans' headquarters were raided in August 2000. Andy provided the police with a map of the gang's HQ. They knew every inch of the Titans' elaborate defences, from security cameras to infrared laser beams and steel-plated doors. Andy's evidence was enough to have most of the gang arrested. Being caught out by an undercover agent brought shame to the few Titans not behind bars. Within 6 months of this termination, the gang had been taken over by their rivals. For the undercover program, this was a glorious beginning to the 21st century, and it helped leave behind an era police would sooner forget. Wendy Heath was just one agent whose experiences undercover had been distressing. Back in 1987, her operation led to over 30 convictions, but returning to regular policing was a struggle. She wasn't quite welcomed with open arms.
You know, you get people saying to you, oh, you've been in the undercover program. You never trust those bastards. They're all druggies.
When they returned to normal duties, many of them encountered inspectors and senior sergeants who didn't want them. And many of them had the secret that they were addicted to and using drugs.
I was trying to sort of like stay away from using. But what's the point? They all think you are. They all assume you are. Why not? You may as well. And then you find that you really need it. It's become such a part of your life that you're now an addict.
As a family, we were a bit out of our depth with how to help her. You know, Mum and Dad don't want to know that their daughter's still, smoking cannabis. They probably don't even want to know she ever did it undercover.
With her father on his deathbed, Wendy felt he should know the truth before he passed away.
Here he is, and he's terminally ill, and I'm having to front up and be honest about the fact that as his eldest child, I'm now a drug addict.
Yeah. That must have broken his heart. Because she was his baby.
One day you realise that you're actually suffering from mental problems as well, and that you're depressed, and that you're stressed, and you're starting to suffer from physical symptoms of that. In my case, pain in both sides of my face from clenching my teeth so hard at night that I was doing damage to my facial muscles. You front up to the program shrink and you say, what's the key to all this? What's wrong with me? Well, you've got post-traumatic stress disorder and you're depressed. Well, how do you fix it? Oh, that's incurable. You'll have to perf.
Wendy was not the only ex-agent to suffer post-traumatic stress disorder, also known as shell shock. It was a common side effect from undercover work from the 70s through to the 90s. To perf meant taking early retirement on medical grounds, but Wendy was determined not to leave quietly. In 1992, she joined with other ex-agents to form the Used Group, dragging the undercover program into the media spotlight.
Tonight, disturbing allegations that a growing number of undercover police agents were falling victims to the very drugs they were trying to combat.
The Used Group stands for Undercovers Seriously Affected by Drugs, and also the term used was how we felt.
Wendy chose to have her identity masked when speaking out, but the Used Group couldn't hide from the scorn of other police officers.
I think they're a little bit soft. I think they should have all been told to piss off. Unless they had graduated to hard gear, then I don't think they've got any excuse.
Just the wrong people, eh? Thrill seekers, black and white thinkers, not adaptable at all, vulnerable. Wrong guys.
Some people see us as bad apples, and they see us as bad apples, I believe, because we've broken the cardinal rule, we've told the truth.
The Used Group weren't allowed one total compensation deal and were left to file individual claims over a number of years. Wendy finally settled with the department in 2004. Shifting back to her tūranga waiwai deep in the South Island, she has stayed off drugs for 3 years.
I live where I live because it's quiet and it's peaceful, and it's close to things that relate to my family. I am on ACC, so I'm always getting 20% less than what I used to be able to earn, and I'm grateful for that.
Man, she was damaged as a result of that experience, and we lost our sister,
Someone said to me the other day, you have to follow your dream. And I sort of thought about it, and I don't have one. I haven't had one for a long time, because there's nothing left to dream about.
Could the undercover program learn anything from the tragedies of its first 3 decades? For current agents, those lessons might just save their lives.
Destroyed my family, my relationships, friendships,
In the wake of the public spectacle that the used group generated in the early 1990s, the police once again re-examined their undercover program. Changes were put in place to avoid the mistakes of the past. Deployments are now shorter. Drug testing is also mandatory, and operators are much more selective when choosing agents.
I believe the selection process became immeasurably better. It seemed to really weed out a lot of the problems.
Some years in undercover training, apparently, nobody has passed. They just don't have any cops, undercover cops. If you don't pass their criteria, that's it.
Where there were problems identified, the agents were pulled out as a priority. Whereas maybe in the past there might have been some sort of tendency to, well, just leave it another couple of days. Not so. By the mid-1990s it was improved remarkably, and I think that can only be to the good. Totally to the good of the program.
By the 90s, they were looking for officers with enough experience to stay on the rails during an operation. This certainly applied to a 46-year-old beat-hardened cop named Andrew Holland.
I turned up to undercover training looking pretty sharp, you know, like a pretty sharp and proud sort of a cop. And I looked around at everybody else there and they had long hair and were all dirty clothes. Oh, what a pack of fucking filthy looking buggers, you know?
From the same undercover seminar, Steve was deployed as an agent until 2002. He has requested we disguise his identity. Although he was half Andy's age, Steve was much better prepared for training.
As soon as I was invited to go to training, I was told, you've got to come up with a new identity. So I went to different pubs and introduced myself under my new name. Got used to just, you know, sticking my name up on, you know, to have a game of pool and things, just getting used to writing up different initials.
Steve was only 23 when he decided to go undercover, and I felt that was very young. I felt he had been very young to go into the police force in the first place, and I thought he was probably still a bit immature to cope with it.
Other people I don't think were quite as prepared. I mean, there were people who I couldn't believe it. They turned up with a bag with their real name in it, you know, socks with their real initials sewn into them, books with their name and address, you know, and I was like, man, you guys are chumps.
One of those chumps was Andy, and his coach soon told him that he'd better roughen up or ship out.
Unless I changed my demeanour, the way I thought, the way I looked, I'd be gone. And the undercover program, from the first second that you turn up there, I mean, they're trying to get rid of you.
The new rigorous selection process was quite different to the early days when agents were sent out with little or no formal training. But one of the traditions of the seminar hadn't changed. Agents were still preparing for life undercover with first-hand experience of drugs.
Now, if only people could see the sessions you have there, there'd be a lot of people around the country who'd be quite envious. There was just constantly a joint going round and round and round and round, and then, you know, and then you're just even learning just things like shotgunning.
I was sitting there thinking that I needed to go to the toilet. And I was so doped that I thought, oh, I can't be bothered moving. I'll just piss me pants. Well, what's the big deal? I'll just do it. I actually thought I was. In fact, I wasn't. But what bothered me was the fact that I believed I was, and it didn't bother me. And I didn't like that.
Also attending seminars were operators looking for agents who would be a good fit for their particular mission. Rob was targeting a stolen goods racket in South Auckland, and Andy looked like the right man for the job.
The plan for Operation Chess was to open up a second-hand store in Papatoetoe and put Andy in the store.
I looked like the right kind of dirty old man that hung around in second-hand shops. I was perfect for it.
Before long, Andy's cover gave him access to an organised crime ring that was stealing over $1 million worth of electronic goods a year.
I used to take great delight in getting the particular joker or the criminal that I was with to turn the surveillance system on for me. And how you turn the surveillance system on was you switched the light switch on, and that activated the camera. It was a little personal thing of mine. I used to love saying to them, oh, bro, could you turn the light on for me? In the end, We got the whole lot of them as a result of this deal we did. The truck driver, security people, people on the computers, people in the warehouse, got the whole lot at the end of that operation.
While Andy was roughing it in Papatoetoe, Steve's first assignment was considerably more upmarket. Responding to complaints from tourists about pushy drug-dealing tour guides, the rookie agent was sent off on the trip of a lifetime.
I just had a blast. You know, the Commissioner of Police gave me a pocket full of cash and said, "Go forth and have fun, my son." You know, I went a helicopter ride and went ice climbing. It was brilliant. Yeah, time of my life.
The first mission he went on seemed to be a little bit of a holiday camp, really.
Of course, my poor old operator on that job around the South Island, he was following me around in a camper van, and so I'd run away, you know, meet up with him in the camper van. I'd say, "I need more cash," and he's like, "Geez, I gave you $1,000 yesterday. What are you doing?" You know, and I was like, "Well, I've just been on a helicopter ride on the Franz Josef Glacier. If you really need to know."
Adrenaline wasn't the only drug Steve was getting. The 23-year-old agent found his adventure sports skills didn't count for much when he attempted his first drug buy while under the influence.
So there I was sitting on the marina smoking pot with a security guard and a couple of hoodlums, and I went to do the deal buying this ounce, and I pulled my cash out and I started counting it out, and I was just so smashed that it was like 200 or 250 or something for the ounce, and I pulled out like 520s and said, "There you go." And he's like, "What are you doing, you monkey? You know, you're trying to rip me off." And so they took off, and I was just left smashed on the waterfront thinking, "Oh well, there's my first deal, blown that."
Despite his botched first attempt, Steve went on to become one of Undercover's best weapons against crime, ultimately facing the might of the mongrel mob. Unlike most agents, 46-year-old Andrew Holland had a family of his own. Before he headed to Auckland, he opened a conversation no wife really wants to have.
Smoking dope and things is not the only thing you may have to do in the undercover program. Like, you may look like a complete and utter clown at times that if you never slept with some woman, you know, some woman that was being basically handed to you.
He may have to get into bed with another woman, for instance. And I said, "But that's not you. That will be the undercover you. And I can accept that. It wouldn't have been a betrayal as far as I was concerned. It would be part of the job."
And she basically said to me, well, gave me permission on the basis that I 100% use condoms for obvious reasons.
It didn't take long for Jill's extraordinary pardon to be considered.
I remember this model. She was a beautiful woman that I was buying speed off. She'd come up to me and, like, you'd buy a bit of speed off, and she'd actually put her hand into her bra, because that's where she used to keep it in case the cops ever searched her. And she'd pull it out of her bra, and it was all nice and warm, and I mean, she was a beautiful woman. And she'd come right up to me and said, "Oh, Andy, I've got nowhere to sleep tonight." And looked at me right in the eyes, mate, and I tell you, she must have thought I was queer. Cause I didn't take her up on it, you know, because I not only just for reasons of not wanting to do it, but
thanks very much, brother.
I didn't know what her motive was.
Fidelity to his wife wasn't Andy's only issue.
We were warned very carefully in our training about women. We might be at a table somewhere doing a dope deal, and this woman's standing back in the kitchen looking at you thinking, what the hell is that joker doing in our house buying dope? We don't even know the bastard. What's he doing here? See, they can ask questions that a joker might not want to ask, might not want to come up to you and say, "Are you a cop?" Because you might punch him in the fucking nose. They fucking call me a cop, mate. You know what I mean? But women, they put their woman onto you, mate.
Meanwhile, his taxpayer-funded joyride over, Steve was starting his first long-term operation. Sent to Northland to target drug runners, Steve needed the right look and, most importantly, the right wheels.
I made the same mistake everyone did, and it's about the props that you have that to make you feel like you're a criminal. You know, the wraparound shades, the beanie, and the car was a prop. And I went and bought a lowered Holland with mags, and I thought I was the business. And the car was actually a real liability because it stuck out like dog's balls. I could not drive anywhere in Northland without people spotting that car. And I actually tried in the middle of deployment to get rid of it. And I just wanted to go and buy, like my granny's car, drive around it.
Despite the flash car, Steve quickly acquired the right running mates to help him get alongside his targets. A running mate is one of an agent's most important assets, a trusted criminal associate who can grant them access to the underworld.
I think it was one of the benefits of being a young fella was that there's just a natural inclination for people to sort of take me under their wing. I played it that I was young and naive and just, a bumbling idiot sort of thing. So I was mates with people who were probably a good 10, 15 years older than me. Quite early on in an operation, a guy walked up to me in a pub.
Hey, you're an undercover pig, eh?
Just said straight out to me, "You're an undercover agent, you're a cop." I was just about to tell him to bugger off, and my running mate turned on him, grabbed him by the scruff of his neck and threatened to punch him out. There I was, I'd only been in the town for maybe 3-4 weeks, and here's my running mate threatened to punch out a long-standing friend on the basis that he was calling me an undercover agent.
Like many agents, Steve began to see the people he was setting up to eventually betray in more subtle shades than black and white.
There were good times, going having a round of golf with a couple of Black Power members, stripping down to my undies and going and getting pippies and cockles out of the river underneath the Waitangi Bridge with a mate, having a laugh, going for a few road trips with the boys. It was a giggle.
Steve's moral compass was tested when he experienced life on the other side of the law.
I was at a pub in Pai here, and we went outside to have a joint, and as fate would have it, just as I've taken a drag on this joint, a cop car pulls up behind us, shines a spotlight straight through the back windows, sees what's going on, and they tipped us out. Electronic equipment that was in my boot was just pulled out and chucked on the ground in the rain, and I sort of protested to that. The next minute I was held up against the car with someone's hand around my throat, and these cops, I could tell they were simply angling for a fight. The whole experience really shattered a lot of faith I had in the police as this organisation of total good.
Andy's operation was also proving difficult. An operator's home is supposed to be the agent's safe haven, but a clash between Andy and Rob's wife spelt trouble.
It would be fair to say there was a bit of animosity there between Andy and my wife.
Rob's wife began to increasingly question the sanity of both of us about what we were doing.
This fraught relationship began to take its toll. The tension in the household came to a head one night.
Andy had just done a really good deal, and he had a few pounds of cannabis. He'd come over in the middle of the night, and we were taking a statement, but we had to do something with the drugs. I didn't want to go and leave them in the garage because you could smell them as you walked past the house. So we had them inside, and the house just stunk, absolutely stunk. And the poor wife came out, and she wasn't too happy.
Rob's wife immediately started screaming at me. "Get that stinking bloody dope out of here. I've got a child, I've got a child." It made me feel exceptionally uncomfortable in the house because I was obviously causing friction between them, and I actually got up and left.
Get out!
Trying to balance the two was extremely difficult, and in the end, detrimental to my relationship. We actually broke up shortly after the operation.
While the undercover role stretched some relationships to breaking point, Steve found the opposite was true as he grew closer to his mother.
I guess I am a bit of a mummy's boy, and I would phone mum every day, and I'd talk to her for the whole drive to Whangarei.
Hey, how are you?
It was a very safe place in the car. Nobody could overhear him. There was no danger of anyone walking in on him and hearing him having a cosy chat to mum.
The road between Kerikeri and Whangarei I was doing sometimes 2-3 times a day, and so I knew every corner, and I also knew every single patch in the reception.
I got to know the road, I think, just about as well as he did. Oh, you must be approaching here or going through there, because I'm getting that the sound I became very familiar with on the phone.
I probably told her too much. Probably didn't help her, put her at ease at all.
Towards the end of the operation, he wanted to just tie up as many loose ends as he could. So he was probably taking a few more risks. Well, when I'd sort of say to him, oh, look, be careful, don't spoil it now, don't blow it, don't put yourself in any danger. He'd just say, oh, Mum, I can look after myself.
Steve was pushing the envelope, toying with a low-level criminal who had questioned his cover.
This guy was a prat, so I started playing with him. I was like, no, that's not right. No, mate, I never went to that school. I never went to school with him. I've only been in Kerikeri for 4 months. And you could just see the concern coming in his eyes, and he's like, well, how do I know you're not an undercover agent? And I was, well, you don't, do you? And he said, oh, have you got something with your name on it? And I said, oh, yeah, I've got a driver's licence. And so I pulled out my driver's licence, and he says, oh, that makes me feel so much better. And I said, why? And he said, well, it's who you say you are. And I said, mate, who issues driver's licences in this country? And he sort of pauses and he goes, the police. And I was like, gotcha. You could just see him. He was just a broken man. He was gutted. And a couple of times when I drove past him, I'd wind my window down, give him a toot and make a wailing police siren noise sort of out the window as I drove past him. You could see him crap himself just about as he was walking down the road. Certainly something that you only do in the final week of your operation, not the first.
After 6 months undercover, Steve reached his termination day and now had to betray the friendships he had made in Kerikeri.
There's a senior sergeant reading out the names and addresses and allocating teams to go and execute search warrants. And for all those cops there, they were addresses with crooks in. But for me, they were addresses with friends in. They were addresses with kids that I'd played with, that were going to get woken up with some hairy cop coming in to do a search warrant.
None of this would have been possible without the help of
he says, here's the agent, well done, everyone give him a round of applause. Which just made me feel even worse. And I don't think I've ever really sort of got over the fact that really I shat on all those people. Sure, you can say, I was doing my job and they were committing crimes and all those sorts of things, but at the end of the day, they were good people and they were good friends, and I crapped on them.
Very mixed feelings. Jubilant because he knew he'd had a very successful operation, but absolutely gutted at having to betray the people that he'd got to know and like so much.
Regardless of these feelings, Steve loved the work and came to terms with this betrayal. He had no hesitation going up against his next target. His objective was to infiltrate the mongrel mob.
My entire role was basically to get as much credibility within the gang as I could in as short a possible time, and then introduce a further undercover agent who would then go on to do a much longer operation and actually gather the evidence. I got a bit of advice from a senior member. He said, boy, the way to get ahead in the mob is to make yourself useful. Be the go-to person. If you make yourself useful, you've got influence, you'll have friends. And I'm a lawyer now, and on a course for the legal profession, there was a senior practitioner saying, the way to get ahead in the legal profession is to make yourself useful. Be the go-to person. The contrast between the people couldn't be any greater, but the advice was the same. Patch members weren't allowed to go into the preser's bedroom uninvited. I could just walk in and out as I pleased. I had privileges that some members didn't have, simply because of the connections I had.
And if you've got access to the president and the president's possessions and his place in the clubhouse, then one, you're at the heart of it, but two, you're very well protected within the gang. The president's mana will allow you to pretty much go anywhere.
I used to wander in and out in my blue jeans and a blue jersey. And of course, the mob were right into their reds. And I know that used to tick some of them off, that I'd go in there wearing a blue jersey, but that was part of my thing of just being a naive idiot.
Now secure within the mob, Steve simply had to introduce a new agent into the scene and his job was done. But the new agent had other ideas.
No, I'm going in there, mate. Seriously,
yeah, he just wouldn't go into the pad. We had a massive meltdown. I was quite concerned. He just ranting and raving and yelling and screaming at me. We were living in a house in the middle of mob country, and he was yelling and screaming at me about the operation, that I was a crap undercover agent.
Open your fucking eyes, man. Jesus Christ, I already know you're a bloody undercover agent. You're fucking useless. Keep your fucking voice down.
I was thinking, shit, I hope, buddy, no one's outside listening.
In such a high-stakes environment with deadly consequences if his cover was blown, Steve was left with no choice.
And I got on the phone and I rang my operator and I said, book me a plane ticket, I'm out of here. And yeah, the very next day I was on a plane and I went back to work, and it was quite trippy actually. I mean, I'd gone from one night I'm sitting there smoking pot and drinking piss with mobsters, and the very next night I was sitting in a police station in Auckland having a beer with some police inspector. And I can tell you the conversation was better in the mob pad too.
Many of the undercover program's operations have focused on cracking organised crime and elaborate drug rings, but agents are also used to help solve violent crime. Outside a Geraldine pub, 65-year-old Desmond Payne was stabbed 14 times in broad daylight. The local police had a prime suspect, but no evidence. Andy Holland was sent under to gather intelligence on a suspect who proved to be dangerous and unpredictable.
And I said, well, just get me close to him in the camping ground, and I'll take it from there. He was standing on his front porch by his hut, and I simply walked over to him, put my hand out.
G'day, I'm Jim Wright. Raymond Cullen.
And I went to the pub with him, started talking about the murder on the very first day. I basically said to him, gee, there's a lot of, what's all these cops doing around here, mate? So he said, oh, there was a murder just over there. And that's one of the best things you can do as an undercover cop, is get someone to mention things to you. Because when you're asking, you're under suspicion. So the trick is to get them to talk to you about it.
One thing the police did know about Cullen was that he'd been signing the church notebook in the name of Don.
One of us figured that, I wonder if that means he thinks he's a Don in the mafia. So I had to introduce this into a discussion. I was sitting in the Geraldine pub with him, having a beer, and in a conversation, I said to him, oh, Ray, do you watch much TV? And he said, I like the news, documentaries, things like that, Jim. And I just left it, hoping he would ask me. And sure enough, the conversation went on, and a little bit later, he said, what's your favourite program? And I looked at him right in the eyes.
The Sopranos, mate.
Well, I tell you, I saw the devil in that man right there. He never said a word. He pressed his hands together like this, and he started contorting his face and everything, and he seemed to physically grow on the bar stool. I mean, I've never seen anything like this in my life. He just contorted his face around in a manner that you just wouldn't believe. I got back and talked to the rest of the team that night, mate, and I said, boy, you've got the right man here, mate. I just seen the devil.
After many weeks' work, Andy was close enough to Cullen to ask him a very direct question.
So, Ray, you're a member of the mafia?
And he looked at me and said, yeah, I am. I'm a Don. I'm a Don in the Cosa Nostra mafia. And I said, yeah, I thought so, mate. I understand, mate. And I've been sent here to help you.
Andy convinced Cullen that he and another undercover agent were both mafia hitmen sent to help him. The agents were under constant electronic surveillance and finally made the killer crack on tape.
I'm Don! You understand? I'm Don! I'm Don of La Cosa Nostra! I'm God's son! Get it straight. I'm gonna fucking eat your bellies.
And he asked me during this conversation to help him murder other people. He would have gone on to kill other people. He had a mission.
With the help of DNA matching and evidence gathered by Andy, a case was made against Cullen, who eventually admitted responsibility for the vicious killing. The delusional Geraldine Godfather is being held indefinitely as a special patient under the Mental Health Act. He can only be released with the consent of the Minister of Health. But not all the criminals Andy caught can disappear forever, and the consequences of being tracked down by an angry ex-con are terrifying. In the modern era, agents aren't allowed to stay undercover for long periods. Steve had several operations in different criminal scenes, but none were more than 6 months. In less than 2 years, his time as an undercover was up.
As an undercover agent, I'd spent $130,000 in 6 months on drugs. I'd spent about 40 or 50 grand or something on living expenses. And then I go and I'm working at a police station where there's one stapler that you share between the various officers, you know, and if you want a hole punch, you go down the corridor, turn right, and you know, and beg the inspector to borrow his. And I hated it. The role that I wanted to have within the police force had changed. I wanted to be an undercover agent. I didn't want to go and chuck a uniform on and attend domestics, go and pick someone up from the local mobile station for stealing a pack of chewing gum. Boring.
The contrast between the heightened reality of undercover work and the drudgery of the beat was too much for Steve. His police career fizzled out within months of his return to uniform. That changeover was not so dull for Andrew Holland. With criminals still waiting trial just 2 hours' drive from his home, Andy was asked to return to his ordinary life.
Of course, a lot of the people that had been arrested were on bail, waiting trial. I was out mowing a bit of the lawn in front of my house. A flash sports car Holden went past and the brakes went on quite hard. A lot of things were going through my mind. I thought, it just could be a mate or somebody. But as soon as he started to back up, I recognised his profile in the car. In fact, one of the most cunning, well-connected criminals that I've ever come across.
Oh, he came in, he looked a bit white. He said, I've just been spotted.
In a country the size of New Zealand, leaving a double life completely behind can be difficult. Andy's bosses were at first cautious about the dangers to Andy and his family.
The New Zealand Threat Assessment Unit put deadlocks and alarms and all kinds of things through my house.
But the bureaucracy soon made things worse for him.
And it was during this time that I was under this immense pressure that the local police placed me onto the highway patrol. Like, I've walked into the Black Power Pad, I've walked into Titans, I've done deals in the middle of the night in Otara. I mean, fearful situations. But I'm not that stupid that I'm going to get into a traffic car and stand on the highway.
When he could be stopping, anyone doesn't know who's in that car. It was the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard.
Here's a guy who's got all this experience in criminals and burglaries and how they act, sell stuff, steal stuff and all that. And they go and put him on a traffic unit by himself in the country.
Andy refused to serve on highway patrol, and in the fallout of that disobedience, he was suspended from all police duty.
This is a matter of principle. I've been attacked by vindictive, nasty people who have used their powers as police officers in an unethical way. And I'm just not going to let it go.
Though Andy does not blame the undercover program for his troubles, the police once again face a familiar problem. A disgruntled agent burnt by his involvement in undercover work and fighting for compensation. But undercover assignments don't always end unhappily. Lessons learnt by police administrators appear to have limited the casualty list as the program has evolved. Many of those involved in the program continue with long police careers. Those who do leave the force are often very successful in the private sector. 3 of the ex-agents we have spoken to are now lawyers, using hard-won lessons learned by living on both sides of the law.
Yes, it's wrecked some lives, but there's also been people like myself who look back on the whole experience and think, man, what a privilege to have done that. It's incredible.
For the police, the continued existence of the undercover program reflects a long-standing belief that it works, however controversial. The principle behind the program is a simple one. To catch hardened criminals, sometimes you have to join them to beat them.
Crooks out there think the world's full of undercover agents, but there's actually very few out there operating at any one time. And I think that's its greatest value. It's just created so much paranoia.
It's a tough job, but it's still something that has to be done if the law is going to be enforced.
The one thing that crime doesn't permit is an honest appraisal of how it does its work. The Undercover Programme is an essential tool of policing.
There has never been one time that I wish I hadn't done it. It has enhanced me as a person. I've got to meet some phenomenal people. And you know you've done some good.
Patrick O'Brien was one of the longest-serving agents in the programme's history. Over 4 years of undercover work took a huge personal toll on the former Catholic schoolboy.
I don't regard New Zealand as my home anymore. And I'm a vagrant. I spend my life travelling, hitchhiking around the world. Home, to me, is a place where I will feel safe, and I don't feel safe in New Zealand. I do believe that everybody has to make a contribution to this, to their community, to their society, and that was mine. That was my contribution. And even with the knowledge of hindsight, if I was given the opportunity, I would do it all again. It's made me what I am. I am what I am because of what I did.
That does not apply to ex-agent Wayne Houseman, convicted of importing heroin in the 1980s.
If I could choose what I wanted, I would choose never to have done undercover and to still be in the police department. The cost is too high, and I guess that's partly selfish because I consider myself part of the cost.
The cost in people's lives is horrendous, and I don't think it can be justified in any way, shape or form.
Despite official comment that the problems of the program have been dealt to, aftershocks from the troublesome earlier days continue. Former agent Clint Rickards was deployed in the 1980s. His recent trial has brought more unwanted attention. Patrick and others say they're not surprised by the most recent allegations.
Some of the things I've been reading about in the newspaper recently was sort of pretty standard behaviour for people who'd done what I'd done.
You know, the pig dog or the pit bull probably has more value to a lot of criminals than the woman that they associate with. Now, if you put policemen into those sort of situations for long periods of time, then they're going to start devaluing women as well. And I believe there is an element of it coming home to roost.
Those people behaved like mongrels in the scene. And you can't do that and wear a blue suit.
Developments in surveillance equipment have raised an argument that sending agents into the underworld is now an unnecessary risk.
With the electronic stuff available, there is just no need to have undercover cops, and definitely no need to have undercover cops using drugs.
It should be stopped now before we have poor young cops as P addicts, if we haven't already.
P is the new phenomenon in the crime scene, and none of the agents in this program had cause to use it. The police have prevented us from contacting current agents who may be dealing with this problem, but no one doubts that P has changed the face of crime in New Zealand. The unpredictable addition of P to any confrontation has made policing that much more dangerous, especially if you're undercover. So, where to from here? What is the future of the undercover program?
Do I think the Undercover Programme has a place? You betcha.
Many undercover agents will tell you it's not worth it. I don't accept that argument myself at all, even from the damage that I've seen.
They like to say that they've changed things and that this doesn't happen anymore, but the reality is not quite that way, and they can't make too many claims which just could bounce back to bite them.
They said it in the late 70s, they said it in the mid-80s, they said it at the end of the 80s, they said it in the 90s. We've made changes, and they make and we don't have those problems. I just don't believe them, because I've told that story, they've been telling that story for decades, and nothing has changed.
It's a tool they have to use. They've been forced to use it, so they do, and good luck to them, and I hope it still keeps going and that they can put all these mongrels away where they need to be.
It should be stopped. Decent people don't do things like that. It's not worked for decent human beings.